It's a very special occasion this Sabbath, and I want to welcome you, all of you, and I want to tell you something. Do you know that a pastor, sometimes being at home and studying his Bible and praying for his church, he's missing all of his members? Did you know that? And you are wondering, oh, what would Rachel be doing? What would Andrew be doing now at his work? What would, and all you can do is either give a phone call or just pray. Pray for those that God can be with them. So it's a very beautiful occasion today where I want to share with you a very special message from the Gospel of Mark. Gospel of Mark is at chapter 8. Chapter 8. My welcoming is nothing compared to the welcoming of God. And my awaiting, sometimes I have a friend, he is pastor in Brisbane, he's the uncle of Rachel, my wife, and he has been pastoring for 45 years, something like that, 45 years. And he tells me many times, he says, Florian, when I'm not to preach on Sabbath, I feel like I'm on thorns, literally. He goes to the church, and he does many things. But he says, I want to share the message, and I can't. Because it's a very big church, and there are many people to share the word, and the message, and then he can't do it. And he says, it's like I'm unemployed, Well, it's the same when you have to wait 7 days to share God's message. Well, I invite you to open up with me in Mark today, and we will read just four verses. 4 verses from Mark chapter 8. We will read from verse 22. And they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought to him a blind man and begged him to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes and laid his hands on him, he asked him, "Do you see anything?" And he looked up and said, "I see men, but they look like trees walking." Then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again. And he opened his eyes, his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. And he sent him to his home, saying, "Do not even enter the village." 4 verses. Have you ever happened to read these verses before, at least once in your life? Let me tell you what happened with me when I first read these verses. It was about 22 years ago when I joined the church. I read these verses and I was so puzzled that I had to stop. What do you do when you're puzzled? You stop and you think. And you put yourself to think, what is going on here? What is happening here? For those of you who were here when I preached about the encounter of Jesus with the Syrophoenician woman, if you remember, the Canaanite woman, and their dialogue about the crumbs and the dogs, this is quite a similar episode that can puzzle you. You read, and then everything you read is very unusual, very unexpected, and very strange. So first of all, verse 22 says, "And they came to Bethsaida." Now, is this detail important? Absolutely. I want to tell you something. Every little thing in the Bible is crucial, not important. It's vital. Why? Because when you look at the details, you will understand the bigger picture. If you miss the details, you will miss the whole meaning of the episode. I want to ask Pastor Colin yes, this is the map, an ancient map of Israel. Okay? In the south, we have Judea, capital Jerusalem. Then in the middle, we have Samaria. Remember about Samaria, right? And in the north, we have Galilee. Now, if you look a little bit in the center of the image where it says Decapolis, right? Well, Bethsaida You cannot see it because this map is not really helping very, very much. But I'm just telling you this. In that Decapolis, that was a Greek province formed by 10 cities from the Greek, Decapolis, 10 cities. So that's where this episode from here in Mark chapter 8 is taking place. So Jesus is moving, as you can see, from Galilee outside, many, many kilometers of walking to go to have a very, very special meeting with someone. That's where it is, Decapolis. In the middle is the river Jordan, you can see. And if you remember, what was happening when those from Galilee, they wanted to go to Jerusalem, down in the south, to the temple. They would go straight to Samaria. Do you remember? No. What they would do? They would cross the Jordan and they would prefer to walk into a foreign territory, which was Decapolis, in order to go back to Jerusalem, to the temple. That was their hatred towards Samaria and Samaritans. That's why Jesus all the time speaks about Samaritans, in order to make them understand that what they were doing was absolutely wrong. To avoid Samaria, they would cross the Jordan River, take a very long detour to go to the temple to worship God. You see the hypocrisy of the thing? And Jesus tried to correct their views. Now, this is Decapolis. Now, a second question. Have you ever wondered, when you read the Bible, and we have the episodes of the 2 demon-possessed from Gadara. Do you remember that? 2 demon-possessed, and then you have a herd of pigs, right? And Jesus is passing by, and he is healing instantly the 2 demon-possessed. So what happened? Jesus sent the demons into the pigs. Question for you. What the pigs were doing in Israel? In Israel, they never ate pork. Never. Have you ever asked, hey, wait a minute. Leviticus chapter 20 says, you shall not eat this and this and this because they are unclean, correct? So what are the pigs doing in Israel? Well, it's very simple. Look at that. Decapolis is where Gadara is, just a little bit up of where it says Decapolis, it's Gadara. So that was a Greek region of pagans that they were living very close to Israel. It's very important to understand. Very important to understand that it was not actually Israel, okay? Very, very important details that eventually will lead us to understand the whole message and what was going on there. So that is Bethsaida. Bethsaida, Julia, that was a very big village that in time of Jesus became a city, a town, was quite big. Now, look with me into the Bible, into the verse 22. And some people brought to him a blind man and begged him to touch him. Begged Jesus to touch the blind man. Few very, very interesting, and I would say unique things. In the whole 4 Gospels, you will not find an episode like this. This is absolutely unique at every level. First of all, some people brought to Jesus a blind man. Do you remember other episodes where other people brought to Jesus the one who needed healing? Do you remember any episode? I found only one. It's in Matthew chapter 9, verse 2. And they brought to him a paralytic lying on a bed. Do you remember when they bring him and they had to take down the roof? Pretty much to let it down through the roof into the room where Jesus was? That's the only other example that is to be found when others bring someone to Jesus. Normally, it was the person who would go to Jesus. And there is another case also of a blind man that is brought to Jesus. Brought to Jesus a blind man and begged him to touch him. Question. Why not they begged Jesus to heal him? To restore his sight? What does the Bible says? To touch him. So they have a preference on how it needs to be healed. You don't have to say a word. You have to touch him. That was their belief. Remember, there are pagans. We are in a pagan territory. Jesus is going there with the disciples. He's taking a very long trip and journey because he wants to show them something. More than that. And he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. Now, the village was at least 5 kilometers wide. That is what the history tells us. Do you know how much time you need to walk 5 kilometers? At least 1 hour. If you are very fast, 45 minutes. If you are very fit, 45 minutes. Okay? Now picture this. Jesus, he is with the disciples. They bring the blind man to Jesus. Jesus takes the hand, the arm of the blind man, and they begin to walk. Can you picture Peter and all the disciples? I can easily imagine Peter saying, whoa, what's going on here? Lord, where are you going? And Jesus doesn't say a word to them. Not a word. He just takes the blind man's arm and they begin to walk. Where they are going, right? Peter, where are they going? What's going on? Peter wanted also to be in control, right? And to know what was happening and everything. Well, this time he doesn't understand a thing. But guess what? Not only Peter did not understand. None of the disciples, they understand what was going on this time. They're in a pagan territory. These people, they are unclean people. They eat pork. Oh, they're terrible. What are we doing here today? I don't understand. And then Judas on the other side, right, speaking to the other and saying, I told you Jesus is too good. He shouldn't be that good. Look, on this hot weather, we are in this pagan city. Why? What for? For whose benefit? Of course, Judas was concerned about his own comfort, right? And in this moment, Jesus doesn't say a word to them. He just grabs the hand of the blind man, and they begin to walk, to walk, to walk. And they don't walk for 5 minutes. And probably some of the multitudes, they followed them. Let's see where they're going. What is going on here? They walk, they walk, they walk. And then, look what happens. Out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes, why is Jesus doing this? Why he has to spit on his eyes? Do you remember the healing of Bartimaeus? Remember that episode? Jesus just says a word, be healed, and then he says, your faith has healed you. Go home. That's it. In this case, it's different. Jesus is taking an action. It says here, when he spit on his eyes and laid his hands on him, he asked him, do you see anything? So many curious things are happening here on a square centimeter of verse, literally, that we need to explain them. First of all, he takes him out. Why? Have you ever seen a blind person in your life? A blind person, completely blind, that needs a stick or needs a dog or needs something in order to be guided where to walk. What is the problem? How do they walk? First of all, they would walk with the stick, right? Trying to find a way with the stick. Or others, they would try to go with their foot. I've seen that too. So this man, who lacks confidence and faith, he's taken by his hand. Now another thing that is very important, and we need to emphasize that too, is the fact that when a person becomes blind, what happens is that all the other senses, they develop much more than to any of us. The tactile, the smell, everything else, the hearing, all these senses, to such an extent that they can recognize a person by the shaking of the hand. A blind person in my life, he was shaking my hand and he knew exactly who is shaking his hand. And I asked him, how do you know that? He said, it's very simple. If you are a blind man, you would understand. But because you're not, you won't understand. It's just all the senses, they develop so much that you recognize the person not just by the voice, but by the shaking of the hand. This was our man here, blind. He was depending on his friends, right? Who brings him to Jesus? Himself? No. Who? His friends. People bring him to Jesus. And they have the hope that Jesus will heal him. More than that, they have the expectations of a certain pattern of how this healing will take place. How do we know that? From the history. The history helps us and tells us that this very strange thing which Jesus is doing here, which is Jesus spat on his eyes. Couldn't have Jesus just say a word, as he always healed with a word. One word, and the man is cured instantly. In this case, Jesus is doing exactly according to their expectations. Their expectations are this. This is the Son of God, the Messiah. And we know that he has the power to restore the vision, the sight, to a blind man like this in a second. But they wanted to be done in the way they were expecting to be done. That was their understanding. That's why Jesus spat on his eyes and laid his hands on him. And this is one of the strangest things of the whole passage. And Jesus says, do you see anything? What do you think about that? When I last time got this question was when I went to the doctor. And the doctors, I said, my back is so sore, the muscles from heavy lifting, and so on. And then he put his finger on his hand and he said, where it hurts you? Here? How do you feel now? It's exactly the same Jesus is doing here. Jesus is the great physician, and Jesus wants to know, first of all, we are talking a spiritual healing here. All the times when Jesus healed somebody, what was the first target of Jesus? The physical healing or the spiritual? Spiritual healing. What does it mean? First of all, he said, your faith has cured you, healed you, has saved you. What does it mean? In the first place comes salvation, spiritual. And only secondly comes the physical. That's how God understands the restoration and the healing. First of all is spiritual. And Jesus is interested to see if this blind man has the faith to connect only with Jesus and not with the multitudes who brought him to Jesus. That's why Jesus is asking him, do you see anything? Look at verse 24 with me. And he looked up and said, now question, what is what the man says? He looked up and he said what? Oh, I see some men, but I don't see them very clearly. They look like trees to me. Question. I am the blind man. Let's assume. George, can you come help me a little bit? Let's assume for 1 second. George is Jesus, right? I'm the blind man. And he's working on my eyes, and he's asking me, do you see anything now? And what do I say? Oh, I see some people, but they're walking like the trees. Now, question for you. Wouldn't it be normal for me to say, Jesus, I see you. You are in front of me right here. Thank you, George. You understand what I'm saying? Where was his focus? Where was his focus? Jesus was talking to him, was trying to give him his sight back, and Jesus would be like talking to him as we sometimes talk to our children, would say, hey, focus, stay with me. Are you with me? I'm talking to you. Hey, focus. I want all your attention now. This is what Jesus is trying to achieve when he's talking to this blind man. And no wonder that the man says, oh, I see men, but they look like trees walking. What was happening? Where was his focus? Elsewhere. Where? At the crutches. What were the people for this blind man? They were his crutches. They were helping him to go everywhere. They had mercy on him. They were his friends. Therefore, all his faith was on the man. His faith was not in Jesus. He heard from them that Jesus is the Son of God and he has the power to heal him, but he is still depending 100% of the man. And Jesus says, hey, look at me. It's you that you have to connect with me. No other people. It doesn't matter what. That's why he says, I see men around. The normal thing would have been to say, Jesus, I see you. You are in front of me. I don't see you very clear, but I see you. That would have been the very normal thing to do. But that is not happening. More than that. Then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and he opened his eyes. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. What happened? Why was it necessary a second touch of Jesus? This is the only case in the entire Bible where Jesus needs 2 steps for a full miracle. Why? What was the problem? Faith, absolutely. We had a beautiful children's story, and Ella was so sharp, and he spotted right there. She said, faith, that's the key. If you have the faith, you will understand everything. Faith is like some glasses that you need to put on in order to see as God sees the things, to see the providence of God. If you don't have those glasses, you will see everything in black. I'm not saying that if you would have those glasses, you would see everything in pink. No. But you will see the providence of God, and you will see the help of God every step. This man, this blind man, he lacked faith. He didn't have enough faith. His faith was deposited in his friends. That's why, look at the last thing of the passage. Look at this. After the man is restored, verse 26, Jesus sent him to his home, saying what to him? Do not even enter the village. Okay, now you tell me to go home without passing the city, without entering the city. What sense does it make? Well, it makes a lot of sense. Because what Jesus tells him is this. Now you are restored. Now you are healed. Do not go back to your old ways. What do you think was his job of this blind man? What do you think he was doing every single day of his life? How was it that he was earning his life? It's very simple. It's very common. History tells us. They would go into the marketplace, the center of the city, and they will just beg. Sit there and say, I am a blind man. Have mercy on me. I have a family. Please give me some money. That was it. Now, Jesus tells him, go home, but do not even enter the village. Don't go back to your old ways. Now you are a new man. Now you don't have to go back to the old ways. Now you're a new man. Now you're restored. Now you're saved. Act like one. Live like one. Stop being the old man. Now you have been restored. You can see everything. You can enjoy life. Now be different. It's very interesting, and sometimes there is a very fine line between faith and reason or rational. Why do I say that? I have a friend who said to me, look, I do understand almost everything you Seventh-day Adventists say, and I do agree with almost everything. I think it's wonderful. But one thing I do not understand. He said to me, okay, I understand that God says in Leviticus, you shall not eat the pork, for instance, right? It's unclean. He said, I totally understand. He said, anyone who would look a little bit of what the pork does on a daily basis and everything, he will say, I will never eat this thing, ever. He will understand that. But his question was this, but why would God tell me not to eat the rabbit, for instance? What's wrong with the rabbit? What's wrong? And he was saying to me this, if you can prove me that the rabbit is as bad as the pork, then I will accept it everything. I will believe it everything. And I said to him, you know, sometimes our reason is not enough to prove right or wrong everything God told me to do. Do you understand me? Which is this. God tells me to do one thing, and here comes the problem. I have to pass it through my filter, which is my brain, limited brain, and if I agree with what God said, I will do it. Do you understand what I'm saying? If I don't agree with what God said, then I won't do it. This is the problem when the faith lacks. If the faith is not there, the person would want to prove every little thing, and after he is convinced and he understands the mind of God and why God said that, then I will accept it. But where's the place for faith? If God said, hey guys, for me, pork and rabbit, they are one and the same. They are harming your body. Do you understand? That's it. No need to understand absolutely everything. That's the barrier and the fine line between having faith and reason. Yes, we have to use our reason, definitely, absolutely. But where the reason cannot grasp everything, the case of the rabbit, of my friend, what do you have to apply? What do you have to apply? You apply faith. If God said to me that, He knows what He's talking about. Right? He knows what He says. In this case, what sense and what meaning would have for Jesus to perform this kind of miracle? He spits on his eyes of the blind man. Why did He do that? Because that was the ancient form of healing. That's what they would expect. And by the way, do you know that the very recent medical research, they have discovered that in our human saliva, there are certain enzymes that can actually fight against the most difficult, impossible to cure disease at this time, AIDS. In our enzymes, in our saliva, there are some enzymes that are so powerful that they can actually fight against that. That's amazing. Of course, this was not the reason Jesus did that. Jesus did that. The reason was He wanted to respond in the way they were expecting. And look at this. While Peter was sitting there, Judas was there, all the disciples, they were there, and they were just puzzled. They didn't understand what was happening. Jesus knew exactly what He was doing. And He did it in that way because He knew that otherwise He would be a stumbling block for the blind man and for the others. That's why He lowered Himself. Remember John chapter 4 where Jesus is talking to the Samaritan woman at the well? Okay? And all disciples are coming. By the way, it was not easy for Jesus to get rid of all the disciples so that He can finally be alone, just Him and the Samaritan woman, and He can share the gospel with her. Can you picture Peter saying, oh, where do we have to go to buy food now? Oh, no, I don't like that. I don't like it. That's why Jesus did it. Because He needed privacy to save one soul. In Matthew chapter 18, we talked about that. The encounter between Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman when they talk about the crumbs. Jesus is alone again. But the disciples are watching. Are just watching. They're not interfering. Why? Jesus needs to work in a certain way with these people which they never had the Bible in their hands. Never. They never went to synagogue. They never had the Torah. They knew nothing. And Jesus lowers Himself so much so that He can be at their level of understanding. It's like you would talk to your 4-year-old son and he would tell you something to play with him, and you would have actually to lower yourself and play with him at his level of understanding. That's the same thing that is happening here. I just want to share with you few lessons that I got out of this journey at faith. First of all, the secret of faith is look straight to Jesus. This is what Jesus was trying to make this blind man to achieve. Look at Him, straight to Him. Forget about all the other voices. Just look at Jesus. You don't need the crutches. You don't need the people. More than that, even if the world says I'm blind, if I am close to Jesus, I don't care what to say. Have you ever heard that? From someone who is not in the faith, who doesn't have a Christian faith, to say to you, hey, you're blind. Why? Why would they say that? It's very simple. Because we do not choose the same lifestyle as they would choose. And of course, because of that, they will say, you don't see like I see. Outside of the village, go outside of the village. That is responsibility and personal commitment outside of the Babylon. More than that, overcoming the personal barriers, and even if I don't understand it to the fullness, still trust in God. Overcoming the personal barriers. And number 4 of this is look and focus on looking to Jesus every day of your life and every hour. If we do that, we will interpret everything through these glasses of the faith. And we will understand that is God's providence. Do you believe in accidents? Do you believe in oh, it just happened to be so? No. Friday morning, I was driving to drop Lena to school. Very early in the morning. I was going from the Barandong, finishing the Barandong, to go towards Orange Christian School. And one thought in my mind came. Normally, when I get out of that, I was in the position to go left, and there were no cars coming from the other side, so I would have gone from the left side to the right. It was free. This time, in my mind, told me, don't go there this time. Go just straight here left. I did that. What do you think it happened? The next second, a four-wheel drive, who was in the position indicating that he's going right, because it was a long queue and the lady didn't want to wait in that long queue to go left, so she positioned on the right side, pretending that I'm going right and then there are no cars, I'll go left. Have you ever seen that in traffic? This is what she did. And that morning, instead of going, I went of course left as I had to go, but because it was all clear, no cars, the thought was, and the impression was, don't go too far this time. I didn't question why not. I just said, okay. And I went very close to the edge. And this four-wheel drive jumped in front of me. What would have happened if I would have been on my right, I was turning left, I was just driving, she would have entered into our car. So this is the connection and the communion. To be always open your ear and your mind and have the communion with God, and do not interpret everything as, oh, it's a, what's the word in English? It just happened to be there. It's a coincidence. It's a coincidence. I'm telling you something. There are no coincidences in God's kingdom. And in God's plan, there are no coincidences. There is no coincidence for us that we have been appointed to Orange Church and to Park Church. Did you know that? Why? Because God has a plan both for you and for us, for me. He has a plan so that He can grow everything His kingdom according to His plan. Nothing is an accident. Nothing. In God's kingdom there are no accidents or no, oh, I made a mistake. No, it's God's providence. And this blind man, he knows that this encounter will change his life. He has faith in Jesus. But at the same time, his faith lies on the crutches, on the people who brought him to Jesus. And the only thing that he needs to be cured of is, instead of being fully dependent and addicted of the man, on the multitudes, he needs to learn how to depend on God and on Jesus only. This is what Jesus did in this case, and the man was healed. Why do we need for 2 steps? Why? His faith was not yet enough. He had faith, but he was saying, Lord, help to my unbelief. And Jesus saw that, because when Jesus asks him, do you see anything? What answer he gets? Yeah, I see the people, my best friends. They're right here, all of them. I can hear them, I can see them. And Jesus says, wrong answer, try again. Let's try again. Maybe it will work this time. Put your faith in me only, in Jesus only. This is the episode that helped me to understand how important the faith is. The faith is just a channel. It's just a tool. And even the faith is a gift from God. We don't produce it ourselves naturally. We don't produce that. We don't manufacture it. It's like an apple, and a boy is given an apple. He didn't make the apple. He didn't produce the apple. He just put his hand forward, the arm, and grabbed it. That's faith. You have to accept it and receive it and take it. We don't produce it. It's no merit in the faith itself. It's nothing magic. It's just that invisible arm that makes the connection between us and God. That's all that it is. It's a beautiful episode that it shows why there was need for a second touch of Jesus. Sometimes, brothers and sisters, we also need a second touch of Jesus. Every day. Why? Because we do have faith, but when the faith from God asks me to get out of my comfort zone, what happens? Do we want? Are we very, very willing and very happy to get out of the comfort zone? Sometimes we're not. Sometimes we're not. And then Jesus says, okay, it's all right. Don't be worried. I'll help you. You need an injection of faith. You need more faith. Because when you step into the unknown, you only need one thing. One. To know that God is with you. And if you know that He is taking care of that. Don't be afraid of tomorrow, because God is already there. Don't be afraid of that. That's the lesson for us today. When God asks me to step outside of my comfort zone, because He has a very beautiful plan to do something with me, and I don't want to get out, what is happening? The miracle won't be achieved unless I step out in faith. If I step out in faith, the miracle will take place. And the blessing will be tremendous. Tremendous. My prayer today is that we accept God's plan for us. And we know that He wants to heal us completely. Sometimes there is need for a second touch. And that second touch will be the one that will restore us completely, fully. And then we will be enabled and equipped, and we will see God around us. We will see the people as God sees the people, and we will see their needs as God sees their needs. And then we will become a blessing just because we are accepting the challenge from God to step outside of my box, of my comfort zone. And when you step outside of that, sometimes it's hard for us to do that because we can't see and we want to have control over everything. Isn't that true? We want to have control over everything. If I don't know one detail, let me tell you one secret about me. I don't like very much surprises. I don't like them. You know why? Because they put me in a situation which I wasn't prepared for. Even if they are very good surprises, that's very strange. But even worse if they are bad surprises, right? Why? They put you in a situation where you cannot have control over things. That is with us human beings. But God says, all you have to do is learn to trust me, okay? And I will have control over everything. Everything. That's my prayer today. The journey of faith is more beautiful than we can imagine. With one condition. Trust God and do not depend on human beings. Depend only on God. Amen.